This video will be an unboxing, installation, and comparison of the Cali-Raised Moto LP6 headlight kit versus the stock Harley-Davidson Daymaker headlight on my 2022 Street Glide ST. This kit fits 2015 to present Street Glides, so first off, here's what comes in the kit. So we have our Cali-Raised bracket and wiring harness. Here's the bracket and screws for the LP6. Nice, looks like a powder coated finish. The wiring harness. Very nicely done, nice and clean. And the Baja Designs LP6 light. Bolts and bracket. I don't think either of these will be used. And that is it for the unboxing. So we will get to the installation. So I had to go back and cut this in after recording the video. I did learn a few things by talking with Jake at Cali-Raised Moto. First, I got one of the early kits, so the newer kits will be slightly different. Like the wiring harness will be dedicated to the Street Glide, so it will only have one headlight plug. Also, they are trying to source some long zip ties for the wire chase to run the harness. Second, the new kits will not have the two screws, the long and the short, for the headlight trim bezel. They will only have the short screw. Third, you will actually need the 4 of the bolts that come with the LP6 light. It will be the 4 shortest 7/16 bolts and corresponding washers. And lastly, the front fairing really does not need to be removed for the install. I did not know this at the time since I did not have any instructions, although I did find it a little easier to zip tie up the relays for a little cleaner install and for the adjustment of the headlight. So now we'll actually get on with the installation. So to begin the installation, we will have to remove our seat and front fairing. My bike is a 22 Street Glide ST, so the seat may be slightly different from yours. Being a solo seat, I just have 2 thumb screws in the back. The front fairing, everyone's should be pretty close to the same. There is 7 T27 Torx bolts, 2 on each side and 3 across the top. And when you drop the front fairing forward, you will just have to unplug the headlight. A lot of people set a blanket or a towel on the front fender so they can rest the fairing on it while they unplug the headlight. Cali-Raised did not supply any installation instructions, but for most part it should be straightforward. I did get a hold of Jake at Cali-Raised and he gave me a few pointers. But for the wiring, they did upload a YouTube video for a road glide. So the wiring is pretty close to the same, minus the second headlight. So let's get started removing the seat. Again, I do just have 2 thumb screws in the back. I have already loosened everything just to make this video a little shorter. I'm going to use an impact to remove the fairing bolts. Again, I have already loosened them just for the sake of time. I would not suggest reinstalling the fairing with an impact though, as you could strip these bolts very easily. So the upper fairing bolt on the side is the very long one, and the shorter one is the medium size. The ones on the ends of the windshield are both the very short bolts. And the one center windshield bolt, which I'll take out last, is also a medium length. You want to be careful with this last bolt. Get it loose. Set it aside. Again, it is a medium sized. It is slightly different than the two lower bolts from the side. We're going to pull our fairing out slightly. I'm going to go ahead and pull my windshield off and set it aside. And this is where you can drop the fairing down and access all of your wiring. Again, mine's going to be slightly different because I have some different lighting going on. So I'm going to go ahead and cut now and get the rest of my wires unplugged, and we will pick back up. As you see, we did get the front fairing removed. This is the headlight plug you will have to unplug. Just one clip, pull back and unplug the plug. Around to the seat, you see we did get it removed, and there will be two bolts, two 13 millimeters, one here and one here, to remove this plastic cover so we can gain access to the battery. Again, for this, I did already have this stuff pre-loosened to save some time. I would still refer to Cali-Raised Moto's YouTube video on the Road Glide for the wiring aspect, but we'll go ahead and run through it real quick, just basically to give you the idea. So we'll remove these two bolts. I have this wiring here from other lights that you will not have. Remove those two bolts. This gray clip needs to come undone. You'll see a tab on the back side here. You'll have to pull back on the black part and slide it off. I've already done so for the sake of time. This black plug here, we'll just push it until it slides out. Set it aside. We have a, looks like an ECM underneath. We'll go ahead and pop it out of the plastic piece and just kind of set it aside for now, gently. And this plastic piece is a little tough. You kind of got to really wiggle it around. There is a chrome clip right here you'll see. And this plastic piece has to kind of come forward, and there's a tab that goes around that you'll slide forward and get pulled off of that tab. You'll see the hole in the plastic right there. And now that we have gained access to our battery, we will cut back when we are running the wiring. Next, we have to run the wiring harness back to the battery. To do so, you'll need to make some sort of a wire chase. In my case, I've used a heavy black zip tie. Cut the end of it off and electrical taped your positive and negative wires to the zip tie. You'll see that the negative wire is slightly longer, so they are staggered. We'll be going through the front fairing, under the tank with the wiring harness, and it'll pop out back around the battery. I've found it a lot easier to go in from the left side. Get it started through. Go underneath of your tank. And it may take a few tries to get it to do what you need it to do, but it should eventually pop out back to the rear of the tank, and you can fish it out and get it where you need it to go. You see mine just popped out right there. Now I'll get it pulled through and untaped, and we will continue forward. As you'll see, I have the wiring harness pulled through. I went ahead and connected the negative to the negative terminal. These are both 10 millimeter bolts. In your wiring kit, there will be this fused link with a wire tap on the end. You will take your positive wire and stick it inside of the tap. Make sure you get it all the way in. There's no need to strip the wire, and take a pair of pliers and just crimp the blue side down on the wire that you just stuck in there, and that will make the connection. And then we'll get all of this tucked away, get our plastic cover put back on the battery, and everything snapped back down back here. Pull the excess wire back through to the front fairing, and you will be done back here in the back. Okay, as you can see, we have the fairing inside. We're going to go ahead and begin the disassembly and removal of the headlight and trim ring bezel. We are going to reuse the trim ring. There is a rubber gasket in between here that we will not be reusing. So let's begin by removing this one Phillips head screw at the bottom. We will not be reusing this screw, so set it aside and keep it. I have already loosened all of these just for time's sake. So remove your screw and you'll pull up on the bottom lightly and give it a small counterclockwise turn and it'll pull right off. There is a small tab at the top that indexes in the very top of the bracket. That's why I have to give it that little turn. So we'll go ahead and remove this rubber gasket, because again, it will not be reused. And again, I would hang on to that gasket. You can take these, there's 3 clips in here actually. 2 of them, all they do is hold in the rubber gasket. So you actually want to remove those 2 on the sides, but leave the top one, because again, that's your indexing tab to hold on your bezel. And you can set that aside for now. Next, we need to remove the headlight and bracket. There is 4 T25 Torx. I've already got them loosened, so we're just going to buzz them out real quick, and it'll all come out in one piece. You will be reusing these. And there's your headlight and bracket. Now, we want to prepare the LP6 for install. So, I was wrong before, and you will need 4 of the bolts that came with the LP6 headlight. There is 4 short 7/16 bolts and corresponding washers. So we're going to need the 4 of them. Our bracket, and on the bracket, if you remember, there were small bolts taped to the tabs, 1 longer and 1 shorter. We will need these to install the trim ring back on the headlight. So to make this easier, we're going to take the headlight and flip it straight over. Make sure you get your orientation right. And this bracket, so make sure the tab with the hole in it is at the bottom of the headlight. So we're going to flip it over, slide it straight on from the back side, and start your bolts. So there's 2 on each side. Again, they are 7/16. The rearmost hole has adjustment, so you can adjust your headlight. So we are not going to torque these down yet. We will go ahead and give them a little snug, but that's about it. Later we'll have to test fit it on the bike to make sure we can find the best spot to aim this LP6 light without completely blinding other drivers. Okay, and that should still let us adjust. All right, so here's your headlight with bracket installed. So we are going to stick it back in the hole. And again, the screws that we removed previously are going to go back in the same holes. And this is screwing into plastic, so you will not want to tighten them down with an impact. For the sake of time, I'm going to run them down, and then I'll come back through and snug them off camera by hand. So there is some adjustment in this, as you'll see. So just do your best to kind of eyeball center. That looks pretty good. We'll run these down. All right, now is where your trim ring comes into play. So we will be installing the trim ring. Again, there is an indexing tab on this one. It's slightly different than the factory one. It does not rotate into place. It does not have a cut opening, so you may have to kind of play with it a little to get the tab in the slot. I'm not going to snap mine in for now because I do have to, again, take it back off and tighten those bolts. But here's the two supplied screws for the trim ring, so you will get the correct one for your application and pretty much screw it in and screw it back down. And that is the install of the light into your fairing. Small update before we go put the fairing back. I did fight this quite a bit, where that tab doesn't, rock in like the last one. So what I actually ended up doing was taking that metal retainer loose on this top side up here and getting the tab rolled in and then popping the two little tabs from the retainer back into place to the trim ring to get it on. And as far as the screw goes, it came with two screws. The one I feel like had a little better finish on it, but it was way too long. So I just cut it down to about the same size as the other one, just to have a little better look. And I'll get this put back in, then we'll get back out to the garage. All right, we got all my wires zip tied back, everything put back together under the seat. I ran a couple zip ties to hold the wires with the factory ones going under the tank. And up front, I mounted the relays with a zip tie. Up here, wiring runs down. There is two plugs for the Road Glide, so I just taped this one up real good and tucked it back up underneath. Here is the new headlight plug, and there is the factory plug going into the harness. So everything is ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and throw the seat back on. I'll get it screwed in a minute. And I'm gonna go ahead and throw the front fairing on, test it, make sure it works. adjust my headlight, and I'll come back when we plug it in and put the bolts back in. We're going to go ahead and reinstall the front fairing now that I have my headlight aimed where I want it. Just get your fairing, plug in the headlight, get it set up pretty close to place. I take the center windshield bolt, stick it in, and just start it maybe one thread. Grab your windshield, and your windshield should slide right down into place. Give it a couple more twists to the center bolt just to be safe. And we will start throwing in all of the bolts that we removed previously. As you can see, we got the fairing bolted up, everything plugged in. This is the low beam. And here's the high beam. Next, I'll get the bike cleaned up and we will get it out for a comparison to the stock headlight output. This is the stock Daymaker headlight. You can see a target that's about 30 yards away. This is the low beam, and this is the high beam. And this is parked in the same spot. This is the LP6 headlight on low beam and high beam. Again, that target's at about 30 yards. Clearly much brighter. So I rode the bike to work this morning. I do live out in the country, and it was an absolute night and day difference. I could see everything on the road, and this light is absolutely worth every penny.